Welcome, everyone. My name is Rick Bontkowski, and this is the AMP'D UP211 Podcast. My next guest is Jeff Bourns, an adapted tennis professional who retired from competitive tennis play in 2019 with a world rank of number 4 in his classification. Jeff has spent his life in pursuit of advocacy for athletes in adaptive sports. It is my pleasure to introduce Jeff Bourns. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Hey, Rick, how's it going? Thanks for having me on today. Looking forward to talking.
It's great to see you, man. I'm so happy that you were able to carve out some time for us out of your schedule. I know you're in Texas at the moment, and I'm assuming it is super hot where you are.
Yeah, I think most of the USA right now is cooking, but yeah, we're staying indoors or taking advantage of the pool and getting out when we can. So, but yeah, it's good to see you, and really appreciate kind of just, in our conversations leading up to coming onto the show, admire what you are doing and using your voice and helping to expand the reach and audience for amputees in the adaptive community. So happy to be here, man. And yeah, hey, let's talk.
No, I appreciate the kudos, my friend. Yes, this is about awareness. This is about us bringing these stories forward and showing the world that amputees are incredibly powerful people. And personally, for obvious reasons, I find these stories fascinating. Yours, in particular, given the fact that I am an amputee as of late, and what I mean by that, for only about 6 years, I am very fascinated with people like yourself because your amputee journey has essentially been your entire life. I would imagine becoming an amputee, I believe at 2 years old, do you even remember a time when you weren't an amputee aside from pictures maybe?
Yeah, that's to be honest with you. I mean, I'm Jeff, and it's just like, these days, like, how do you identify yourself, or
Oh,
how
yeah,
do
yeah.
how do I identify?
It's confusing, isn't it?
It's like Jeff,
Yeah.
check there. Yeah, that's always been something. And to be honest with you, growing up, I started to notice I was different than other kids maybe when I was younger in elementary school. And that's when I started to notice that, hey, I wasn't, or I wasn't the only color Skittle in the pack kind of thing. You know what I
Sure.
mean? But I became self-aware, and just past that, I mean, it's just been my life, and it's been an extension of my life. And I've actually viewed it as, now I'm in my later years, a blessing, because it's allowed me to do some amazing things that I probably may have not been able to do if I hadn't had been born this way.
Sure. No, and I think when I put myself in that space of what would my childhood have been like if I had limb difference, because as a kid myself, I sort of focused a lot on what made me different, from other kids. Even though I had my limbs, it was something that I would sort of examine. I was a thoughtful kid. I was a sensitive kid. And if there was anything about me, it could be hair color. I mean, just something different. It always kind of fascinated me. So I think when I look at amputees like yourself and what you've gone through in a lifespan, I guess there would be sort of what you're describing, this acceptance in a sense of I'm just Jeff.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not really about, my limb difference as it is. This is just who I am. This is who I've
Right.
been my entire life. And going from a below the knee to an above the knee, I believe at 9 years old, what I guess two-part question. What was the reason that you ended up above the knee? But also, given that you were older, a little bit older at that point, maybe a little more, like you mentioned, self-aware, a little more reflective, what was that experience like once you realized, okay, well, this is going to change, to some degree?
So what's your audience here? How do you want me to keep the language? Are we PG 13?
I think
Or
what do you, Brian, what do you think? PG-13 at this point? Yeah.
yeah, no. So yeah, for me, I remember growing up, and kids would always kind of make fun, poke fun, but I would always like kind of just like laugh about it, because for the most part, when I was below the knee, I remember like it was different when I lived in Ohio because I had a set group of friends that knew me from birth till 8 years old or so. Then I moved to Houston. Then I had to get introduced to a new peer group. So when I came to Houston, I remember being a below the knee amputee, and just we had to do like running, the mile, and I would be just like passing like able bodied kids, and just laughing when I was doing it, just yeah.
And they're like, wow, look at that guy go.
Yeah, and so, but then it was like, yeah, they tried to pull my leg off at the same time on the playground, like they would like drag me, and like because I could keep it on. But my parents ended up ultimately making the decision to have my leg amputated. I'm a knee disarticulation through the knee when I was in third grade, and we did it the summer that I was going into the third grade, so I wouldn't miss school. And so that way, I'm able to bear more weight down on my patella,
Yeah.
and have a longer arm. But I mean, I guess just the big difference was just learning how to run again. That was the tricky part. But as being a kid, you're always like, as kids do, we always like go out and, if you're a parent or whatnot, you watch your kids, you observe your kids, you 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 just explore, you do stuff, right? So I just taught myself how to run at the time, and my first above the knee prosthesis, actually, it was just the socket, and then it had like a strap on the back that connected to the lower limb in the foot,
Really?
and then that was the resistance. So every time I would swing it would clunk, clunk, clunk.
Wow.
So
So pretty
I had
archaic technology at the time, right?
what was that?
Pretty archaic at the time.
Yeah, no, it was, but it's been cool to been able to live it and
Yeah.
experience it, and um, yeah, just live it. But yeah, so then I uh, went to a different practitioner, and when I got to intermediate school, and he fitted me with my first hydraulic knee for above the knee amputation, and that from there I just took off, and was just another kid,
Yeah, and
honestly. Jeff.
it's funny because the thing I think I'm most curious about with people like yourself, and I know a few amputees now who have been with limb difference their whole lives, and the spectrum of technology in terms of prosthetics that they have gone through, from a young age, through adolescence into young adult, into fully matured adult. It's really remarkable. Um, and when I say remarkable, in some ways, it's there are certain things, depending on practitioner, depending on company that you're dealing with, whatever clinic you're using, whatever prosthetist you're using. Some things that are sort of stuck in the dark ages, but then there are sort of these like major advancements. So you being an above the knee at 9 years old, and now being a man and having gone through all of the major amounts of high functioning activities that you have. I mean, you've seen a lot of technology and the birth of a lot of technology, wouldn't you say? Hey, amputees, I'd like to take a moment to introduce everyone to the liner wand. We all know how bacteria and odor can be a major issue with prosthetic liners, and the liner wand is the solution. Did you know that if you're using soap and water, you may be making the problem worse? The liner wand uses a patented formula that deletes all bacteria and smells for 2 weeks. The liner wand is available as an affordable subscription or individually, and it always ships for free. To learn more, visit thelinerwand.com. That's THELINERWAND.com. Use code 211, that's 211, and receive 50% off your first subscription today. You can also use the code RICK, R-I-C-K, and receive 25% off your cleanser subscription as well. That's thelinerwand.com. I mean, you've seen a lot of technology and the birth of a lot of technology, wouldn't you say?
Yep, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yep.
There's a very, we make a very small congenital amputees are a very small percentage of the amputee population as a whole, if you would take it as a pie chart,
Yeah.
per se. So I've seen a lot of technology that's come out that's worked great. Not everyone refers to, sprinting feet now as, running blades
Yeah.
from Oscar.
Yep.
But, back when I was running track out of high school, I had spring light and then flex foot. And so there was just a bunch of different technology and, everything kind of developed it. But there was a huge boom that came after, and unfortunately, it comes at the expense of others. But research and development, R&D, with the Gulf Wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's when things kind of really kicked up, and microprocessor knees like kind of really started shooting off and taking off, and different versions of different knees and applications started to become available. So, you could pick a different car, that you wanted to drive rather than just, the 2 or 3 that you had prior
Sure.
models.
Sure. No, it's funny because, so much of those technological advances, give many people like yourself the opportunities to do more, to perform better, to seek out, more active spaces. I mean, you were, from what I've read, I mean, you were an active kid. I mean, you were involved in a number of different sports before everything kind of funneled down to tennis, which totally excelled in and became this, trailblazer. But I mean, you were a really active kid. You were in a number of sports, correct?
Yeah, you know, back then, I mean, now it's adaptive sports, which is great. And that's like, there's so many people that, behind the scenes that have been for so many years just doing countless hours of work. But yeah, I just ran around with my friends and we rode bikes and played football, basketball, tennis. Just, I was real active, ran around with everyone. Uh, and then, yeah, it, I would say, just going into tennis, uh, it was different because, in high school when I was competing against, I played on my high school tennis team, played against able-bodied kids, and so, I did have some issues there. Um, as far as like kids teasing me, and now like that I'm older, I'm able to look back at things kind of and process things. But yeah, I had some issues.
Yeah, you look at it different as an adult, as we all do, on those childhood experiences that may have seemed very big. They sort of seem like this, these massive events that occurred. And as you get older, you can sort of look at that in terms of its microscopic perspective in the grand scheme of your life and say, Well, yeah, I mean, that stuff happened and I got through it. Um, just talking about your childhood, kids that are active. I came from that generation of kids where, I mean, we just weren't homebodies. I mean, we were never in the house. We were always outdoors. We were always riding our bikes, just doing silly things, jumping off garages and doing all kinds of stuff that,
Yeah, I was doing those same things.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And, you know, so many amputees that I speak to, I think they tend to get into this space of, well, I need the right technology. I need the right prosthesis. I need the right practitioner. I need all the best of the best. And then I think about, lifers like yourself, lifetime amputees who come from these more archaic technologies before all these really cool things were available. They were high functioning. They were running around doing all these things that didn't necessarily require, the best foot, or the best microprocessor or the best whatever. And somehow they muscled through it just by sheer will and really just wanting to engage activity. So when I hear someone kind of getting down on availability of technology, I sort of see that as, okay, is that the full story?
Right.
Is part of it that you're just not wanting it bad enough. Do you really want it bad enough? Because when I first became an amputee, I really struggled with skin breakdown.
Okay.
I have a lot of bony prominence on my residual limb, and I was wanting to perform. I was wanting to get back on a bike. I was wanting to get behind a drum kit again. I was wanting to do all these things, and I was struggling. And yes, there were tweaks that were necessary to my socket, but at the same time, I truly feel like so much of my advancement was kind of like up here. It was a lot of mental, just
Yep.
just kind of getting past myself and getting out of my own way and saying, you know, you just got to try harder. You got to stay focused. You got to stay in the game. All those other things are going to come. You're going to get the train up. You're going to get all the education that you need. You're going to find the right clinic. You're going to find all of that. But if your head isn't in the right place, you're never going to truly do all those things that you want to do. So getting back to my original point, which is, someone who's a child and they just want to ride their bike and play with their friends, they're not thinking about, do I have the best foot? They're just,
Yeah, they just you go with the flow, and you were talking about technology, and so and getting in your own head, and I know for me, being a lifer, what an impact technology has had in certain areas is the feeling of like, because sometimes it's just like, you know, I ask myself like, what would it be like, or what does it feel like, or you know, to actually be able to, or I'd always question myself, or I would look at people and study them and be like, okay, so am I supposed to run this way?
right.
So I would constantly be looking at people. But in high school, we had stairs that we had to get up, to get around,
Sure.
and so we had to tuck in our shirts, with the dress code, right?
Yeah.
And so my prosthesis, my socket would always ride up high, and I was real self conscious. So I actually got a note from my doctor, and I was the only kid that was allowed to have untucked shirt, uh, so I could scoot around. But I would go up the stairs, and at the time it was just a hydraulic knee. But I would, grab the rail, and I would boom, like just like use my I'm right leg, so I would, power forward with my left leg up, and use my handrail and just go up as fast as I could. But I was always so self conscious of the kids that were behind me and what they were
Oh,
thinking. Am I going
sure.
to fall? I never fell, but I would always think that in my head, like, please, Jeff, don't fall. And then going down the stairs, that was difficult. So when these advancements in technology took place, you know, with the new R&D, now I can go down step or stairs step after step. So that's a really cool, like actual feeling,
Yeah.
and uh, it it's different, and it really you have to soak it in and take some time because it's just like, wow, this is what it's almost like. I can go down
Yep.
step after step after step after step. I can walk backwards now. I can
Yeah, there's
run to the
a
side.
no, you're right. There's a comfort that you enjoy. It's almost like for someone like yourself that has been on that far end of the spectrum, for you, it's such a gosh, just like a it's almost I would think for you in a way, it's like, wow, this is such a nice thing that I've never experienced because I've been doing this my whole life. So it's almost like a luxury item when you think about it, because it's like I've been driving this, you know, I don't know, two-cylinder car, and now all of a sudden I've got this Ferrari, and
Yep.
I can open it up and have a great time. So I would think all of those things are much more appreciated by someone like yourself, whereas someone who's a brand new amputee, because I'll talk to someone and they'll say, I'll say, okay, well, when was your amputation? It was about 6 months ago. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what was your question? Well, how can you help me get a running leg? I'm like, what? A running leg? You're a
Right.
6-month amputee. Like, how, who, either you got a lot of money or you're living in fantasy land, because you got a much further way to go before anyone's going to talk to you. Any responsible prosthetist is going to talk to you about your running leg. I mean, let's
Yep.
get you up, let's get you mobile, let's get you functioning in somewhat of a normal way, and then, build those plateaus, from there.
Right. Yeah. I know with me in my case that overall, I feel incredibly blessed that I've been able to experience what I've been able to experience, because some of these feelings and these experiences that I have been able to experience are not as available or readily available to others as they should be.
Yeah.
It literally costs an arm and a leg to get an arm or a leg.
Yeah. No
Uh,
pun intended.
so, it's one of those where it's like, hey, um, you know, from my experiences in my life and what I've done, this is where I'm at now. Like, how can I use my platform or anything that I've done to be able to let someone else have that feeling or experience and be able to have the opportunity? I think the big word is opportunity. That if given an opportunity to do something arises, that's the biggest thing to capitalize on, and um, are those opportunities. So
Yeah, and I was reading. I can't remember where exactly I was reading about you, and it described this scene, which was kind of vivid for me. It said you were, I believe it said you were 18 years old. You were in
yep.
your prosthetist's office. Uh,
Shout out to Dan Morgan. I'm going to send him a copy of this, but that guy that is a practitioner, like anyone who wants to get into the field, you do change people's lives. And I always say, find a practitioner that works best with you. You get a good relationship with them, and you stick with them
yeah,
because they get a very intimate in a relationship with you and know what your needs are. So yeah, Dan Morgan, he did wonders for me back in the days.
no, that's wonderful. So you're 18. You're at his office, and you're thumbing through a magazine, and
Yep.
you're seeing these high functioning amputees, these athletes, and that was a moment for you where it was sort of a defining moment in your mind as far as what you wanted to do, with your life moving forward. Can you describe that for me?
Yeah, right. That was the first time that I had ever heard of. My dog is totally gnawing at a bone. I'm sorry if it's messing up, audio. She's my buddy, Tonka. But
Tonka, you said?
so, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
what an
yeah.
awesome name for a dog. I love it.
Yeah, but she's just sitting here chomping at the bone. But yeah, but back to your point, when I saw that, I was excited, and it was 99, and I was reading about guys like Earl O'Connor and um, uh, uh, Marlon Shirley and all these other guys that came before me. Matt Smith. I mean, there's a lot of names I can throw out there, but I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like, I can actually go out and compete against others like myself.
Yeah.
And so at the time, the internet and things, it wasn't around. So I wrote a letter to Hanger Prosthetics and Orthotics and said, hey, their office at the time was in Oklahoma, Edmond. And so wrote a letter and said, hey, I'm a very high functioning individual and an athlete, and I would like to see, how do I get involved with this stuff? So they told me to, fly over, and Kevin Carroll actually fitted me with a sprinting prosthesis. And at the time, everything was still like kind of like really scattered, not really well known. It was mainly like track and field and kind of stuff like that. And I never really was a track and field guy.
Right.
I was more of a basketball and tennis and court sport guy. But yeah, that's where I met amputees for the first time in my life, and it was a very defining moment that I had during the 2001 Endeavor Games, and Oklahoma. I met Rudy Garcia Tolson, my buddy. He was up there. Just a lot of people, and just to be able to exchange stories and just say like, wow, like I'm not alone. Like there's other people that are out there
Sure.
that are like me. Like that was like really big in my own development because, as I'm Jeff, but still always like something felt like there was a piece missing,
Sure.
or just wasn't whole. So, yeah, just being able to do that and experience that through sport, and some others, it may not be through sport, but through, different channels, was, life changing for me.
No, I think that's a really important point because so often when I am contacted by amputees in a random kind of way, just like through a DM or like a quick email or something,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
usually because they're in what I would describe to be as sort of an alone kind of space, wanting to be part of community, wanting to feel that they are not alone and that there's someone else that is experiencing those isolated kind of feelings. And, one of the things I really admire about, who you are and your story and your life is that it is really built around advocacy and wanting, that inclusivity piece where and this is people with all types of let's for the sake of this conversation, let's call them disabilities, but wanting to include those people with limitations to be part of something bigger and better, and to normalize that and make people feel included. So no, I would imagine at that age, seeing, high functioning amputees and, having that aha kind of moment where you go, okay, this is something I want to do. When do you feel like tennis became the thing? Like this is my discipline. This is the thing that I'm going to focus on.
So growing up, and I actually didn't learn this until like towards the tail end of my professional career in playing tennis when I was doing tennis. But growing up, I used to play in summer leagues for the USTA and other things like that against able-bodied kids. And,
Yeah.
I was actually, ranked, let's say above average against able-bodied kids. But there was a lot of stuff that, my parents kind of withheld from me as far as that goes with tennis. As far as making my middle school tennis team, where
Yeah, I want
I was
to
playing
stop you for a second because I've read this somewhere. I think you're alluding to a situation or maybe even a series of conversations where you were competing against other kids, with two
yeah,
legs, and
yeah,
I believe there was sort of a movement that kind of bubbled up of, you know, Jeff is better than these people. Like, why
yeah,
is he not on the team? Like, what's happening here?
yeah. I didn't find that out until like the year
Oh
2019.
my gosh.
but but it happened in '94. My mother and other parents, were like, hey, Jeff is ranked higher. Like, why is he not on the team?
Right.
And so but
And is that just built around
yeah.
stigma? I mean, is that just
Yep. So that all kind of just adds into, uh, the foundational building blocks and just learning about life and kind of how you're perceived in certain areas. But, going back to tennis and when I thought it was, or wanted to move it into the
yeah.
thing, I had a really unique opportunity with hanging on prosthetics and orthotics in sprinting and swimming. Now, for me as a sprinter, I was okay. It wasn't really my thing, but swimming was actually really good. I was just very self conscious at the time. I didn't, want to wear the little speedos that they had, and
Why
but
not?
it was because it was like I was always used to people looking at me and whispers and like you would
For
hear
sure.
things and so it was just was just a little extra sensitive at that point. I didn't have anyone to say like, "Hey Jeff, you're actually a really fast swimmer. You're beating the crap out of these other people." In
Well,
the
I didn't want to wear
in
a
the pool.
Speedo when I had two legs, so
Just just swim, just go, just do it. I mean, I was doing some great
sure.
things, so I missed an amazing opportunity uh, with uh, with that. And while I was going through college, and then became a father, and then I had some back issues, and so then tennis, I switched fully to that. Just with after the back issues to rehab myself and to get
Right.
stronger. And then I started learning more about okay, adaptive sports are really becoming organized now, and all these guys that I used to like compete with, and they were my friends. They were like all on TV, and they're doing extremely well now, and they had great support systems, and they kept on following that path. I didn't, and so then when I jumped back into adaptive sports, I was looking at tennis, and I said, okay, well I can play very well standing at a very high level, but only wheelchair tennis was offered if I wanted to compete and make a lot of money and go off and get ranked and things like that.
Sure.
So I approached the USTA, United States Tennis Association, and started talking. And then from there, I just linked up with some other people, around the world and in South America. They really got things going down there. They call it tennis adapto de pai, which is stand-up adaptive tennis in English. But I just started from there. I just told myself, I was like, all right, Jeff, you missed one great opportunity. And so now you're given a second chance.
So
And so I
I'm gonna
put
stop you there,
everything into it.
because I want to do a deeper dive into
Okay.
that whole process of how I believe you're truly a pioneer of stand-up adaptive tennis. You're one of these people that was instrumental in bringing that to the world stage. So we are going to take a brief pause, and we are going to jump into a segment that we do on every podcast. It's called AMP'D You Should Know. Hey everyone, today on AMP'D You Should Know, I'd like to introduce you to Isaac Osilia. Isaac is a 30-year-old right below the knee amputee. He's been an amputee for about 1.5 years, so relatively new to all of this. He actually lost his limb during a motorcycle accident. Really tragically, he actually lost that limb shortly after losing his mother to cancer. So you can imagine the heartbreak of losing a loved one and then going through the trauma of being in a motorcycle accident and losing a limb. He's definitely someone who I would describe as dealing with adversity in a very, very powerful way. I've spoken to Isaac on the phone. We've exchanged messages. He actually reached out to me online. He had some questions about what it would be like or what I could recommend in starting a walking group in his area in California. Now, I found this pretty extraordinary only because he's pretty much a brand new amputee. And given that set of circumstances, losing his mom, going through a motorcycle accident, he seems to be anxious to give back to this amputee community. And only 1.5 years in, I find that remarkable that his mission is to get people out walking, get them active, and really just wanting to engage people at any level of fitness, whether they're in a chair, whether they're crutching, whether they're in a prosthesis or not. He feels it's really important for people to stay active and get out there in the world. Isaac is also a handyman, so he's very active. He's always on the job site, always pushing his body physically. He's just an incredible individual, has a really, really bright spirit and a great sense of humor. And Isaac Osilia is definitely an amp you should know. Hey everybody, we're back with Jeff Bourns. We've been talking about his life as an amputee, and now I want to start talking about his journey into bringing stand-up adaptive tennis to a world stage. Jeff is a trailblazer in that regard. He is someone that was instrumental in developing these programs and making the connection points that allowed things like the Tap Open to happen. So, Jeff, if you would indulge me, and although I've done quite a bit of reading on this, and I'm fascinated by it because, of course, playing tennis, standing up in a above the knee prosthesis, that alone is kind of like wow to me. And
A lot
watching
of biomechanics involved, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I've been a loyal follower of some of your video blogs, watching you train, watching you adapt in terms of movement, in terms of mechanics. The one thing that I wanted to say as well, it would be a disservice if I didn't to my father, big time tennis player. I mean,
Okay.
I grew up around tennis. My dad was an avid player, and he was pretty vicious on the court. He took no prisoners, let's put it that way. And he was one of those people that took up tennis later in life and eventually became sort of a dominant force in my family. And he's a lefty, so that always threw me off to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was just kind of a beast out there. But walk me through it. So start at the beginning, as far as conceptualizing, what you wanted to do and how that came about, through your connections with Hanger, through your connections with other people.
I'm actually looking for a tennis ball right now. Hold on. This dog of mine. Come here. Okay. So, just when I got back involved in tennis, it kind of boggled me, my mind a little bit. And this is where I've learned a lot about myself as well. And learning to love myself and value and like, wow, hey, I can do some pretty amazing things, because for a little while I didn't think that, what I could do was great. I was just like, okay, well, yeah, I'm just this guy. But when I started looking at things then through a different light, and saying like, hey, this can be used for the greater good of getting people involved and getting people interested in a sport, that I started to just ask questions. And I think that's one of the most important things to do. Just, you question why. That's the big question always, is why. And so I question, why are we not able to play tennis professionally,
Yeah.
standing on a prosthetic leg or using orthotic devices?
Right.
And so when I started asking those questions, a lot of people started asking, why not?
Yeah.
And or saying, why not? And that went through the USTA. Then I linked up with some people in South America and in Europe and other places around the world. And so, just as far as like the creation and like everything with that, adaptive sports is still, I mean, now it's like really getting out there, but uh, with tennis and with giving this other opportunity now, and post COVID, it's really cool because for a little while it was just centralized on, okay, South America, then we, North America, rocking it, Houston,
Yeah.
we started a, or I started a tennis program in Houston that um, 2014, and I started teaching kids and had some adult students come out, taught them traditional tennis rules. But the big thing was like actually, trying to sell an idea, because at the time people hadn't really, thought about, or they knew they had some exhibitions and they kind of knew a few things, but it's like you have to be that person, or you have to, be, an amputee, kind of to understand the footwork and the mechanics and everything like that to teach people, K levels and, all that good stuff that you learn as being an amputee, but the general public doesn't know, they're not educated about. And so that for me was very fulfilling, was to, being able to jump in there and do that and start that in Houston and really start the first, program in the United States. Yeah, Houston's Metropolitan Multi-Service Center off of West Gray, for amputees and others that wanted to play standing instead of using a wheelchair. Played wheelchair tennis, I think is great. But yeah, now you can have the option to choose if you want to play standing or seated, and it's going to continue to grow. But um,
Was it difficult for you, given that on the one hand you're trying to facilitate this sport, you're trying to throw your flag in the sand and say, This is something," but then also on the other end of it, I mean, you're competing. I mean,
yeah,
you're one of the athletes. So I always
yeah,
think to myself, in organized sports, which is a massive endeavor, because let's face it, there's always money involved.
right,
The powers that be will step in and say, well, how are we going to make money off this? How are we going to monetize? And on the one hand, you have all these sort of dreams and ambitions for people to be able to appreciate this sport and the beauty of it, okay, and the competitiveness of it. But at the same time, man, you're out there playing too. I mean,
yeah.
that's a difficult equation, I would think,
So
for yourself as a young man.
yeah, so my coach best summed it up, I guess, one day, where he said it's tough to be the host and the hunter, at
Right.
the same time. But
Totally.
you have to be welcoming to everyone that wants to come in and kind of but
Right.
it's, yeah. So you have to keep that in mind. So I always empathize with anyone who is you know running a tournament and fully immersed in that as
Yeah.
well, because and this just isn't with it's not just, and this is the cool part, this is just not with adaptive sports. This was, back in tennis, back in the day when women were trying to make
Yeah, I know.
movement with tennis, and
Big
people of
deal.
color, Arthur Ashe, they were all trying to make their movements, with tennis. It started the same way through exhibitions,
Yep.
and you're just putting yourself out there. And so Cindy Benson, she's a great friend of mine. I remember 2016, we had the first international tournament in the United States, the USA TAP Open.
Right.
And before I kind of walked out on the tennis court, because I was like, literally, like, everyone that I had met in South America, they'd never been to the USA before. So I was grabbing them from the airport and making sure, that they got to where they needed to go. And then we had interpreters that were, speaking different languages, and everyone was kind of just like blown away.
Was
And
there,
taken
was
back. And that was,
there, I mean, the Tap Open, obviously a monumental event.
yeah,
So you're wearing all these hats in that arena, right?
yeah,
You're kind of like picking people up at the airport, you're organizing, you're talking.
yeah,
And then there's got to be this moment where you say to yourself, "Oh yeah, I got to play too."
yeah, yeah.
It's
I mean,
it's
I
crazy.
remember, I remember going into that, and with me, my serve is one of my biggest, uh, spots to my game,
Okay.
or pluses to my game. And so I was practicing for a while, just getting it down and making sure that it was solid. And I remember 2016, everything was just, you know, great on the money. But as far as practice, I didn't get as much practice as I wanted to before. Just, we had players that were coming in, and some
You're
whom
busy,
we,
you're busy, being an Uber driver for the tournament.
yeah, not a free Uber driver, or a, yeah, yeah. And then just,
You got to be thinking this is getting insane. Like I'm all over the place. I'm everywhere at
no,
once.
yeah, but to me, it became more than tennis at that point,
Yeah.
because I saw people coming from a different country that had never been to America before,
Yeah.
and they were just so fascinated with seeing overpasses
Really.
and like highways, and just taking pictures. And so, uh, for me, it's like, when I would travel to different countries and I was fascinated with different things, taking pictures, I mean, they'd be taking pictures of that. And so I got to experience that. And like, that was like, kind of started to take a little bit more precedent over playing as well, because it was like, okay, like, these are life experiences that someone's experiencing, and they're going to
Yeah.
remember it for the rest of their life. They're having fun. We're making, an experience, a memory for people.
Right.
But yeah, I did wear a lot of hats, and yeah, but I went out there and still, gave it my all, and dressed well, and yeah, went out there and banged it around a bit. Yeah,
No, it's extraordinary to me. And again, I think says so much about your character as a human being, as someone who is in pursuit not only of excellence in his sport, but also someone that is pursuing this advocacy for adaptive sports to say, this is something bigger than me. This is something that I'm going to be a part of. And this is something that I want to see get momentum. And,
right.
I was watching a video blog that you did, and it really touched me. You were talking about the idea. It was beautiful. You were talking about this idea of planting seeds. And it's a simple analogy, but when you think about it, it's not always so much about, the end game with anything, just like today, this conversation, we are planting a seed.
Right.
Just like those experiences that you went through as a player, as an organizer, as someone that was, bringing these athletes over to this country to expose to the world, how powerful amputees are. Thousands of seeds were planted in that moment. And if we all take that personal responsibility in planting a seed or two every day, I mean, the world becomes a much better place. And, you know, I always marvel at amputees that they immediately want to get into that space of giving back.
Yep.
And to me, that is something that is just so incredible. I mean, it took me, because I think what I want to say is sometimes because as an amputee we require so much self-care, it can feel like somewhat of a selfish endeavor in that we're constantly managing, our limb, our equipment, our ability to function in a consistent way. And that moment when you realize that advocacy and helping others and giving back to the community, those dividends are just huge, because when you see that rebound and come back and people say, thank you, thank you for doing that. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for, I get all these messages now, thanks for doing this. Thanks for doing this. And, it's funny because I think, I just kind of wanted to meet like all of my like heroes and idols, like
Yep.
this is my like secret way of meeting you and getting to engage you. But the good news is we're doing some good in the process, and
Yeah.
someone is going to watch this and think about your story and what you've been through and what you've accomplished, and it's just going to lift them to a whole other level, and
Right.
I think it's just a wonderful exchange, and I so appreciate what you brought to the sport, and through all of your adversity, because I mean you have definitely had your setbacks. I mean, you've had times when you were in recovery, that you were nursing different different setbacks. I mean, do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah. That's so. I've really, with what we've been talking about, my life has been kind of segmented into three different parts.
Yeah.
And so the first part just growing up, identifying Jeff, hey, it's me.
Yeah.
And then the second part, kind of acknowledging, yes, I'm different. Uh, I'm disabled, but I didn't feel different. People may have approached me, uh, in a different way, and I may have, kind of felt something, from that. But I was able to hide things, but I just still always kind of felt the same way.
Sure.
And then I had some stuff happen with my spinal cord,
Spinal
where,
meningitis, right?
well, actually, so I was born with, and I contracted the tethered spinal cord syndrome. So I
Okay.
have partial spina bifida, but I had a tumor that was uh, latched onto my spinal cord. And so when I was trying to grow up, it was pulling down. And
Mm.
so they had to go in and cut the tumor out with the laser.
Yeah.
And so when they did that, it caused some nerve damage. And that was back in the fourth grade. That was like 91, 92, I think. Yeah. But I did get uh, spinal meningitis from that. But, at the time, it was cool because like the doctors like brought, Nintendo into the hospital room for me. And
Yeah.
I got to meet the Houston Rockets and, Kurt Schilling, Houston Astros, all these
Oh, that's
sports
awesome.
players came in, Hakeem Olajuwon. It was really cool. So I actually didn't want to leave the hospital and go back home. I was like, hey. But
It's great.
yeah. But later in life, as you were saying, and as we were talking earlier in the piece with technology, that technology is the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that sometimes that there is some technology that comes out where if you don't put a product out that is, uh, you know, meant to do what it's supposed to do and work on a consistent basis and work like it's supposed to work,
Hmm.
uh, bad things can happen with gait deviation. That's the biggest thing as far as like, being an active amputee. You want to make sure your gait is good. You want to make sure you have a neutral spine.
Right.
You're stretching. You're doing all these other things. And so just kind of, going through that process later, that brings me to the third point where in my life where I like actually felt uh, physically disabled. I didn't feel physically disabled prior, um, but I did feel physically disabled from the things that happened to my back later in life. But then I became empowered again back through sport and back through getting involved with the adaptive community and
Yeah.
uh, talking with people and just um, setting some goals and putting my energy and my focus in places and
Yeah, and
things like
speaking
that.
of
But
your focus in places, weren't you involved with that documentary, um Tin Soldiers?
yeah, that's Ben Duffy and Mike Sassano. Shout out to those guys. Um,
I mean, that was a
it
pretty
was
remarkable endeavor. I mean, I've seen many clips. Um
He's- So that clip of me breaking the car, my car window, that was not staged because, like, I have some friends they'll watch it. It's available. Here we go with the plug.
right, go for
Hulu,
it.
Netflix, any iTunes, any platform you can watch it.
Yep.
Tin
Tin
Soldiers. Thanks
Soldiers.
to my guys Ben Duffy and Mike Sassano for doing that and all the participants that were in the movie. But yeah, so I locked my keys in the car and we were doing I had a nonprofit organization where I was like really trying to get amputees out and networking with each other and going out in public because you really don't see a lot of us like out in public if you're ever out together.
Sure.
So I was like, hey, let's do this. And so with Tin Soldiers, it was all right. We're documenting this experience, and I was going through some issues with my left foot, um, where I lost feeling in my foot because of my spine
Right.
and so they had to debride part of my heel, and so it was kind of weird, like watching it like actually grow back. It
Mhm.
was kind of a pretty gnarly process to to watch, but yeah, in the movie, I took my leg and I locked my keys in the car, and I would used to, have I forget what they're called lanyards, and always keep them there, but. Yeah, we couldn't get in the car, so I took my leg off and multi-use tool. I bashed in the back window, and just put my leg on. And then we went out and did an adaptive wheelchair basketball clinic that day in Houston. And rest in peace to my friend Alton Ford. He used to play for the Houston Rockets and the Los Angeles Lakers and
Yeah.
Phoenix Suns. His wife Victoria, but yeah, Alton passed away from cancer. But yeah, he came out to that camp, and it was really great uh, experience.
Yeah, if you can check that out, it's really something. You know, obviously it's on multiple platforms, Tin Soldiers. Um Now I know that you had a relationship with Bobolad as well. And can you
Yeah,
tell me a little bit about that as far as how that materialized and what that was like, as far as representing them?
yeah. So Babala is or Babala. People pronounce it different
Yeah,
ways.
I
It's a French
noticed that.
company.
I actually noticed that online. Everyone pronounces the name of that company different, and I think that's because it's a French company, correct?
Yeah, some people will be like Babolat or Babolat, or, Babala. But yes, French company, 1875.
Right.
They started getting things going with tennis strings, and just as one of those, you never know when you'll need this useful nugget of knowledge. But in creating tennis strings, they were really they were the first company that created natural gut tennis string, from the cow. And so what they did is they called it VS, right?
Okay.
And so they took you have to picture the alphabet A through Z. And so they were like testing each individual tension and whatnot. So they started with A and they got all the way to the letter V, and then they found that level of tension and strain was superior, so they call it VS, and so it's VS superior, and so that's why they call the natural gut string Babala VS Touch or Babala VS Team.
Okay.
It's a the natural, it's the best natural gut string out there.
Makes sense.
But so I got involved with them, and it was kind of like right place, right time with everything. I just put myself out there. When I was competing, I was already using the products, and I was just sitting with a buddy of mine one day, and we were kind of like talking about like, okay, well, how do I want to market myself? Because I'm really going to give it my all here, and I know physically that I'm only going to be able to perform at a certain level, because that's one thing people don't understand, like with adaptive sports, that sometimes you get the misconception, like there's some amazing, phenomenal athletes all around the world.
Right.
They're great. So sometimes people get your expectations, where you can go to the roof, but so with Babylon, just getting involved with them, I went to my tennis store one day, Racket Pro in Webster, and ran into my now good friend Jason, and kind of told him a little bit about my story, and then they put backing behind me, and then I started to get more involved with the company, and then they endorsed me, sponsored me as an athlete, and that feeling for me, in the beginning, it was kind of one of those like, are you just giving this feeling, or are you just giving this, to me because you kind of feel bad, or is it like but they like talked to me and said, no, hey, we think you're a great athlete. And so it really helped my confidence as well as a person, and being able to project that as well to the company. So they're the best.
Well,
tennis
I think
manufacturing
I
company.
think it shows how humble you are, to go to that place mentally. You're a phenomenal individual. I just it's a remarkable story, something I have enjoyed following and reading about, and I'm so excited, for what life has in store for you, moving forward into the future. Jeff, I know I'm not alone when I say thank you for your advocacy, for your ability to reach out to the community and help as many people as you possibly can. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for us today. So,
Thank you too, man. You're doing a great
oh,
job.
thank
and
you.
It takes a lot of us out there, and so hopefully everyone can get out there and work together and continue moving up the ladder.
Absolutely.
And pushing
Absolutely.
the bar. So
No,
Rick,
we've got lots more
thanks again.
stories coming, and what I'm hoping is that, you and I can revisit in the future and, keep this momentum going and keep highlighting people like yourself so that we all have sources of inspiration. So I want to thank our audience for tuning in today. My name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'D UP211 podcast. I want to wish everyone health and happiness, and we'll see you next time.